Hi guys, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm here with Dr. Kori Propst, and today's going to be a great topic. We're going to talk about intuitive eating. And a lot of people think I'm not pro-intuitive eating. I'm just not pro-intuitive eating for a contest prep approach. And also, I will say, I think a lot of people that struggle with dieting will sometimes use intuitive eating. This sounds like a great method for me, but they maybe haven't reversed to get their body to a good state to intuitive eat. So there's probably a lot we can cover here. And so we'll go ahead and kind of let you do an intro for us on what intuitive eating is and how clients can transition into that.
Yeah, this could be like a whole program or year-long course, because intuitive eating is not just, and this is what I hear from a lot of people, it is not just eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. That in itself, Adam, can actually become another very restrictive diet and push people towards very disordered eating tendencies and body image disturbances. And I say this because our bodies indicate or cue us in terms of hunger in a lot of different ways. If any of you listening or watching have ever just begun to pay attention, it's not just when your stomach growls that is a cue of hunger. Like, I get shaky, and or like I don't generally experience stomach growling, but I know I'm hungry because I'll start to feel really empty, or I'll get a little bit irritated, or I'll feel kind of antsy and listless, or I'll just feel my energy go mrrr. And you know, as competitors, I'm almost 100% sure that everyone has experienced all of those. Because we're not generally eating according to hunger and fullness. We're generally eating on a set schedule, whether we're hungry or not, and we're stopping before we're full. Because what we're doing is pretty extreme. In order to get as lean as we need to get in order to compete well. That principle of intuitive eating, the listen to your body, honor your hunger, isn't necessarily easily implemented, if that makes sense. And that's probably why you don't, one of the reasons why, Adam, I would imagine you don't use that. You don't use intuitive eating during a contest prep. So there's that. Make peace with food. Some of the principles, because there are a lot of principles of intuitive eating, I think can be applied during a prep, but we have to look at each of the principles on a continuum. And because we're doing something in an extreme sort of a sport, we're probably going to end up on one of the extreme ends of that principle also. Not like smack dab in the middle, super balanced. What we're doing is not balanced.
Right. Not at all.
Not at all. So I think the thing to remember is that dieting for competition is inherently, it's pretty incompatible with intuitive eating, except for the understanding that, like, I do need some structure, and intuitive eating, unfortunately, is understood to be by so many people as unstructured. There's a lot of structure in intuitive eating because it's about us learning to understand ourselves and what our bodies need, and what eating different foods, what impact that food has on our bodies, and setting some guidelines for ourselves so that we're genuinely taking care of ourselves. So, what I think maybe gets in the way a little bit, especially when we're prepping for a contest, is the first principle of intuitive eating is reject the diet mentality.
Right.
And we're dieting very strictly and in a pretty hardcore way. And so there's that part of intuitive eating isn't necessarily something that we can align with. But in terms of dieting too, what we're doing is and maybe not with you as a coach or with diet doc coaches or with pro physique coaches, I know they're dieting flexibly. So they're not cutting out complete food groups unless they have like a severe food allergy or something. And I think as coaches, I feel like I'm kind of all over the place with this right now, Adam, but we're looking and paying attention to our competitors and how they're talking about food and how they're using food in their lives. And do they have I can only eat this list and I can never eat that list. And that may be healthy for some of them. I mean, I have some boundaries around food where I'm like, I just don't eat that.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't eat that. I don't feel good eating it. My body doesn't like it. Psychologically, I don't feel very proud when I put that in my face. Like,
Mm-hmm. And is it a portion control thing too? Like when you have one of those, it's hard to want to have a serving of it versus maybe more.
Sure. Yeah. Like salty, crunchy things, like chips and crackers. I don't buy that stuff because I want to be able to make better choices. And I recognize this about myself, that in certain situations, like if I'm lacking in sleep or I'm really tired or I've just got a lot going on, a lot on my plate, it's that much easier if that food is available for me to just grab that and start shoving it in my face. And I don't want that. Like, we get to choose what choices we have available in terms of food. So if that's not there, I'm not going to eat it.
Right.
And I'll choose something healthier and something that's going to be in my best interest and probably help me feel more energized instead of getting a blood sugar crash.
I've also noticed just a lot, like you said, crunchy things. A lot of things that clients struggle with are things you don't have to cook. Because you're not going to set out and spray butter on a pan and bake 20 pieces of tilapia and eat all of it. It's usually a much quicker response than that. And not hating on tilapia. I think tilapia tastes great. But
I liked it with ketchup.
Most people won't do it with foods that they have to prepare too often.
I mean, I remember when I would get so hungry during competition prep that I could just keep eating chicken. And I binged one time while I competed, and it was not in my home. It was at a restaurant post show. But I had a lot of I really practiced mindfulness when I was competing, and that's actually a part of intuitive eating, is acceptance and, not believing every thought that comes into your mind. And actually, I sat down one day and I had this legal pad of paper in front of me, and I said, I'm going to make a tick mark every time I have a food thought. Adam, that was a really silly activity, but I mean, I did it for half an hour and the whole front page was covered in tick marks. But I mean, it was silly because I literally set myself up for that, because I said, every time I have a food thought, I'm going to write it down. Like,
right.
I primed myself for thinking about food. But I would eat outside of my macros, but eat chicken.
Yeah, that's funny. And I think for people, with intuitive eating, I like to compare it to people who have the skill of driving, and we've learned to drive on the freeway without looking at our speedometer forever. We kind of know what 65 feels like. But if you can remember as far back as when you first started driving, we used to have to glance at the speedometer a lot more when we were 16 or 17 than we do now. So intuitive eating takes a lot of time. And just because, you ate, eggs for breakfast and oatmeal, it doesn't mean you can't still continue to do that. I actually encourage my clients to eat similar to how they ate during contest prep, with maybe larger portions and maybe not measuring them as strictly, but also just making sure that that doesn't turn into 12 donuts in the morning.
And that's not exactly intuitive eating either.
Correct. Yeah.
One of the principles of intuitive eating is like honoring your health,
Yes.
And so taking care of ourselves with an understanding of, how does this food affect me? Is this in my best interest, eating this food? And really eating foods that energize us and yeah, you could say that a donut energizes me for like a minute before I crash and burn. And it tastes good, so we could look at that as honoring the satisfaction factor of intuitive eating. But is that honoring my health? Is it honoring satisfaction long term? How good do I feel psychologically and physically when I do eat these foods? So Dr. Eric Helms wrote an article. You and I have discussed this one recently about like a sustainable bodybuilding paradigm concerning nutrition. And what he proposes is that after the competition, in the off season, is a really great time for competitors to practice intuitive eating. And studies have shown just how impactful intuitive eating can be to minimize body image disturbances and reduce disordered eating behaviors, and have very positive impacts on just health markers like reductions in blood pressure and triglycerides and cholesterol and things like that. And I have to agree with him that would be the perfect time, once the show is over, to begin practicing these principles, honoring fullness and hunger, eating according to what the body is indicating in terms of like a need for food. Because we're used to like food controlling our thoughts. We're used to restricting certain foods. We're used to ignoring hunger and ignoring satisfaction. Like I said, we're used to using the scale as a measure of success instead of like performance variables or energy or satisfaction. So also, we're in that period where our body's changing shape too, and that can be difficult. I remember after I competed the first few times where, as I put on a little bit of body fat, and had gotten really used to being so lean, it was just a little bit more difficult. And so part of intuitive eating is learning to trust that our bodies aren't betraying us in doing this, that we need to revitalize the metabolism here. And it can take up to 6 to 9 months after that long of a prep to, have our metabolisms come back online. And for a lot of females too, if they've stopped having their periods, like that increase in body fat is really important. So intuitive eating supports a lot of these things happening, and supports like body appreciation at the same time.
A big problem I'm seeing is clients almost force feeding if they're reversing and getting their intake up so high.
Yeah.
And that, that's just as bad as anything else. All your systems are working harder. I'm seeing a lot of people with just really chronically high blood sugar because their coach is giving them all these carbs and no fats to, blunt the glycemic index.
Or it's just too much food.
It's just too much food. Yeah.
And they're just uncomfortable. And because their coaches have said, you need to meet these macros now, it's like, crap, I've got like 2 more meals to eat before I go to bed. Like,
Yeah. And just having that pre-diabetes can make it really hard to prep the next time.
oh yeah.
So yeah, it's that's definitely, you know, I think one of the benefits of listening to your body actually is an amazing thing.
It really is. And I will say that even when I was competing, this was important to me. Just understanding kind of where my body was at. Because I was doing therapy at the time and I would have face-to-face client meetings. You get really good at reading kind of where you're at, where your energy is, where your focus is, whether it's there or it isn't. And I would schedule my sessions like right after I would eat a meal.
Mm-hmm.
So that I had some clarity and I could think clearly. But the other thing I would do, and I'm sure you and Joe have you've probably addressed this in one of your podcasts, is, you know, if I got done with a meal and I was like, I am ravenous right now. And I got really good at being like, yeah, you're ravenous, but you're okay. Like, there's going to be another meal, Kori. But when it's really starting to affect your work and your concentration and your relationship, it's like, okay, no, I'm stacking my next meal right on top of the one that I just had.
Mm-hmm.
So you do experience a greater level of satisfaction. And while I'm doing that, Adam, I am consciously eating slower and more methodically and more mindfully. Because our tendency when we're that hungry is to just shove it in.
Mm-hmm.
And then
fix the problem as fast as possible,
well,
right?
yeah. And we almost make the problem worse at that point because we're like, well, where did it go? And then we experience this sense of like deprivation again because it was there and then it's gone. But I would stack a couple meals together and then typically I'd be able to go a little bit longer before the next one and feel a little more human.
So you found you could do that on certain days of the week and that method worked well for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's awesome. That's a good tip because I think a lot of people think of that as being wrong because they get so caught up on, well, I can only have this much protein.
Mm-hmm.
But if that is going to cause you to break, you know,
Not
I would
worth
rather
it.
you have too much protein in one meal and stay consistent versus, you know,
Yes.
going
Versus
overboard.
binging later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you pushed it just way too far. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can stay ahead of the game and you know at the end of the day a client's struggling, we can say, let's add just a normal meal to the end of your day.
That's it. I use that with my Gen Pop clients. You know, rather than binging, because there are certain times of the month too when these aren't competitors who are dieting. These are just regular people who want to lose body fat. But there are certain times of the month when the appetite can get a lot higher and where they just feel like they're picking all day long. And I'm like, let's have a meal. Let's have a real meal, you know, 25 to 30 grams of protein, 25 to 30 grams of carbs, like 5 to 10 grams of fat. That right there, that's a lot. That's a smaller amount of food than you would eat all day long, just kind of grabbing and noshing and, you know, binging at the end of the day. So
And more satisfying.
exactly.
And I think that, you know, clients, when they are, you know, kind of picking in the kitchen, each pick is almost like a slap on the hand. And even when we tell them have one meal, that's like one slap on the hand, even though we tell them it's okay. At least that's one slap versus like 10 of them going through the kitchen. And if you tell them it's okay, they'll eventually believe you, especially once they see their weight sustaining.
Exactly.
People would just be so surprised how hard it is to, you know, gain body fat when you're being very rigid with your diet. So,
yeah, great point.
So I think this was a very good intro to intuitive eating. And I think, like you said, we could go really far with this one. And that's why it's so difficult I literally recorded probably a 8 or 9 minute audio for a client on transitioning into intuitive eating. And,
Yeah.
I think that she's doing very well with it. I think she expected week 1 to be a fix and like, oh, this is going to all be better. And I said, this is going to take time.
It takes a lot of practice. Yeah.
It takes a ton of practice.
And awareness and listening and experimentation and yeah.
It's a skill that you have to develop, but once you develop it, no one can ever take that away from you. So, yeah. So awesome. I think this was a great episode. So thanks for joining us this week, Kori. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, and we'll see you guys next week on Contest Prep University.
Thanks, guys.